Good morning, good evening. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing, we wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. Gonna have a little bit of Canadian history here today. Literal Canadian history. I've been doing some digging into the Molson family. Well, most of you know Molson's as a beer product or similar beverage product that you consume. These days they've merged with Coors, who themselves have a very interesting history. But the Molson history goes back a long time. As a matter of fact, they were over 100 years old before Canada was even a nation. So today we're going to focus on the legacy of Molson and all the things you use today that you didn't even know were started by them. Now, the founder of Molson's, John Molson, was actually a minor aristocrat in Britain. But there were some squabbles over the family heritage. He had a trust fund, but it's not really clear what happened. Something went wrong. He basically wound up not getting what he wanted, even though he was supposed to be taken care of. Now, there's some dispute whether it was uncle who did it or when his uncle passed on, the next person who was supposed to manage the trust fund was doing shady stuff. But at any rate, John Molson in the mid-1700s decided that he needed to come across the sea. So he jumped on an ocean cruise, literally as a stowaway. Talk about your illegal immigrant. But he came across and worked in your standard jobs for the time, tending fields, whatever he could get just to make ends meet. And then he had a chance to purchase a brewery. Not a big brewery, just a brewery. And he was going in partially with a couple of friends. Now, John Molson was a real go-getter. He wasn't just one of these people that wants to unlock a business and, have it sit there and make money for him. No. He then took a steamship. Well, actually, not a steamship. Steamships are a little bit away for John. But he took a ship back across the Atlantic to go to Britain and to learn from the beer producers over there how to mix your hops, your malt extracts, all those things that go into making a successful beer today. When he came back, he did something very ingenious. He went to his friends and asked them to grow the hops for him. Now, hops is a very hardy crop. One of my best memories of the Czech Republic are the hops fields. And I mean, they're long and they take up lots of space, but at the same token, they smell like popcorn. They smell really fantastic. So by John getting his friends and family and neighbors to grow them, he would be able to supply them with a touch of revenue and in return get his product for dirt cheap. Because remember, at 1700s in Montreal, there weren't really many people growing hops. So John managed to achieve an objective victory over his opponents by having fresh hops. He then got into the brewing business, and of course, as you may know, he's done very well. Him and his ancestors have done very well to this day. But that wasn't where the genius of John Molson stopped. He went back to England again, about every year or two, and he would bring his beer with him, and he sold more and more of it. During the lead up to the War of 1812 and during the War of 1812, soldiers, what do they do during their pastimes? They drink beer. John Molson was more than happy to provide British soldiers with beer. And that's how he made a lot of his money. He had a lot of kids. It's tough to keep track of them all. I could if I did a better job, but I was more interested in the general history. But one of the things that John Molson did with his kids is he started one of the first steamship lines. Now, these are the big old paddle wheelers that you see. If you're lucky enough, you might have ridden on one. And if not, you've seen them in film and art and stuff like that. He had enough money that he's able to establish his own little steamship line. And the soldiers requisitioned it so that they could use it as a troop transport. So this thing suddenly became a major moneymaker for John. Having done that, John's sons decided they wanted to open a bank. Now, a bank in the 1700s and early 1800s is not the same as it was today. There's no Federal Deposit Insurance Commission or anything like that. You're taking on the risk yourself. And they established the Molson Bank. Like I said at first, John Molson didn't want to participate, but his sons did. And they made a lot of money. As a matter of fact, this bank is with us today. At first, the Molson's Bank, like I said, did pretty well. And they started opening all sorts of sub-franchises, all the investments and stuff that you get into. And they were one of the smart banks. You see, the poorer banks love to do that thing where a bank takes in $1 and loans it out to 10 different people. But they were able to avoid a lot of the financial insecurity. And in the 1800s, banks are opening and closing left, right, and center. The term bank run is there for a reason. The Molson Bank did very well for itself. As a matter of fact, in the 1920s, it changed its name to BMO, the Bank of Montreal, which, as you know, well, probably some of my listeners have accounts at that particular bank. BMO might as well be the Bank of Molson's. There were other investors, but the Bank of Molson's was what Bank of Montreal was built around. So while it's separate from the family, that part of their legacy is still going. The steamship line, well, steamships had a limited time in service and they're all gone now, but at the same token, that made money for the Molson's people. The Molson's people invested in all sorts of sports and entertainment, because that's what you do when you're rich. And they still have an incredible amount of influence on the NHL. I mean, they own the Montreal Canadiens, when the Montreal Canadiens were just a simple expansion team. When the Toronto Maple Leafs were but babies. And Toronto Maple Leaf fans are still babies. I'm kidding. But Montreal Canadian fans are no better than Toronto Maple Leaf fans in any way, stretch, or form. We all cry like crazy whenever we lose. But that's besides the point. Molson's bought something and held on to it for years. Want to see an asset's value really go up? Buy it and hold it for years. A house. If you bought a house 10 years ago, you would be staggered at what it's worth today. If you bought the right trading cards from either Magic or Pokemon, you would be staggered at what they're worth today, 20, 30 years later. Anything is worth a lot. Even Beanie Babies. Certain Beanie Babies are making a huge comeback. Now, it took 30 years for you to realize a profit off the investment, but when you're the Molson's family, you can afford to sit and wait. And what you might have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars is now worth billions. With a B, billions. Perhaps even more. Because they have their nice little sponsorship deal with the NHL, their products wind up on international TV in Canada and the United States. Not bad for a family whose business is brewing and who thought opening a bank would be too risky for them. Now, John Molson also had another interesting fact. He was a deputy district grand master of the lodge for Montreal. That means all the Masonic lodges in the area were basically under his aegis, not his control, but he was the grand overseer, the one who gave his approval. The interesting part I found about this is, I have no idea what the cat just knocked over. The interesting part I find about this is that most DDGMs and Grandmasters only serve for 1 year. John Molson served for 6. So why was he there for so long? Simple. Money, popularity. Here's the man with the money who shows up every evening, probably with something to give out to everybody there. And 1800s lodges were very different than what we know today. When we talk about having a lodge in total darkness for certain parts of the ceremony, in the 1800s, it would have been in total darkness. Because, they would extinguish their candle, and outside there were no street lamps. There were no nothing. And these guys, quite honestly, were probably plastered up. Remember, alcohol was not considered a sin. And you're talking about John Molson, who probably enjoyed a tipple or two. So, yeah, it was an entirely different atmosphere for the Masons around then. John Molson was a simple man, and he did actually go back to Britain on occasion and use his family fortune over there to increase their wealth in Britain. And he reinvested it over there as well, which is why he has international sales and was eventually able to leverage the merger between his company and Coors. Well, he didn't, but his descendants did. So here's a man that in the 17 and 1800s, when sailing ships were pretty much all that you could use to get back and forth, was running a multinational business that he pretty much built from scrap. Now, he was a minor noble. He wasn't starting with zero money, but he started off with effectively zero resources because that's what he brought with him. Rags to riches story? Not quite. Kind of a riches to rags to riches story, but one that influences us to this very day. Molson's is still around. They still have a massive influence on the culture of Canada. I mean, the amount of events that they give money to is staggering. Like I said, they did found the Bank of Montreal. Their descendants are still popping up, and they have more money than they could ever know what to do with. The only reason that they're not invested in more things is because they've decided one of the smarter business ideas is to start focusing on your core product, which is beverages. And Molson's beverage tree is staggering to look at. I mean, you not only have your alcoholic stuff, but they have a number of non-alcoholic options as well. Probably you've consumed some within the past 6 months, even if you don't drink alcohol. Molson still has a way of getting their products into your mouth. So what we look at here is a stowaway who made a brand new life for himself, basically off nothing more than knowledge. And he got that knowledge because he was the upper crust. So when people are talking about knocking the 1% off their perch and taxing the resources, the only problem with that is the 1% are very good at defending their resources. They got there with a reason. We could take Elon Musk's fortune away tomorrow. And within 5 years, all that money would be gone, and Elon Musk would still have his various business. He would probably have branched out into new ones, and he'd still be going to Mars. Because the top financial people are always the top financial people. There's nothing that you can say or do. If I went down this street right now, give $1 million to every single person, if it's never going to happen, but if I could, I already know which people would be able to survive and which people would blow it. And that's just simply because there are consumers and there are investors. Now, we look at investors as being good because they invest in themselves, but the consumers are the ones that really drive the economy. If people are not spending, then the money doesn't go back into the economy. And that's the weird thing with banks and the rich. They keep the money going in their personal circle. So instead of it going to the local burger joint, who then gives it to their employee, who then goes and pays their rent, whatever the cycle might be, it just goes into the bank accounts of the rich and sits there. John Molson understood that. The rich understand that. The average person doesn't. That's one of the purposes of the Silverlight show, is to show where money goes and where it belongs. It belongs in circulation. Capitalism is all about money circulating. But what we are living in is a system where the money does circulate for a little bit, but eventually always winds up in one of these big black hole bank accounts. Whether it be a person, whether it be a corporation, it doesn't matter. It still gets sucked into one of these black holes, and in return, those of us who are not one of the black hole business ventures have to go out, earn our keep, and unlike John Molson's, it's very difficult to leverage what we have into something more. That being said, John Molson's proves it's possible. And that's the lesson we want everybody to take away. It's never too late to get started on your big idea. We do need inventors. We do need innovators. We do need people to start figuring out ways that we can get off global multinational corporations and onto locally produced stuff. But we'll leave that for another time. We hope you enjoyed this episode of A Silverlight Show. If you did, please click like, share, and subscribe. And we hope you have a fantastic day.